Hi, everyone. My clock says 1 o'clock, so we're ready to get started. Thank you so much for joining us, and welcome to this, the second Viking webinar of 2020. For today's presentation, we'll be discussing finding the ideal sprinkler choice for higher warehouse storage facilities. I'm Nancy Houghton, the Marketing Director here at Viking, and in a moment, I'm going to turn it over to our presenter, Brian Berkeley. This is part of our monthly webinar series, which highlights a wide variety of different fire protection subjects. Coming next few months, we'll have presentations on Viking's new window sprinklers, advances in residential sprinkler technology, citing new digital tools for sprinkler system design, as well as foam fire protection. To find out everything about our past and our upcoming webinars, visit our website at vikinggroupinc.com/webinars. You can also find information about our upcoming training opportunities. Those take place at a new headquarters facility near Grand Rapids, Michigan. You can find out how to attend those at vikinggroupinc.com/training. And of course, for all of the latest news from Viking, please check our social media channels and stay tuned to our email announcements. After Brian's presentation today, we look forward to answering as many questions as we can. We've got a big group today, so we might not get to all of the questions, but we'll be happy to follow up offline if we need to. You can submit your question now or at any time throughout the presentation by using the Q&A window in the lower right-hand corner of your web links related to the webinar, along with today's slides. And a recording of this webinar will be available within the next couple of days through our website. With today's presentation, we'll discuss how recent changes to FM Datasheet 8-9 provide new recommendations for ceiling-only fire protection in storage facilities with ceilings over 45 feet high. As warehouses get taller, it's important to select fire protection options that will help maximize cube space and reduce water supply requirements. Our presenter today is Brian Berkeley, Business Development Manager for Special Hazards and Detection Systems here at Viking. He provides sales support of special products and Viking products and has more than 22 years experience in fire protection inspection, installation, design, manufacturing, and applications. He's done it all. He's performed fire sprinkler and clean agent seminars for SFPE and ASPE. Brian, welcome to the webinar.
Thank you, Nancy. Thank you for everybody attending today. Look forward to going over the storage sprinklers with ceiling heights over 45 feet. Okay, so for everybody that's familiar with the FM Global data sheets that they have, we're going to first just touch base about the basics. Whenever we're talking about storage, we will utilize 8-9, storage of class 1 through 4 and plastic commodities. You'll see here up in the right-hand corner the interim revision. Factory Mutual is providing revisions not just once a year. So it's very important to make sure that you reach out to the FM Global website and make sure that you're looking at the most revised data sheet of this nature. Please remember, by going over to FM Global to get their data sheets, it's free, doesn't cost anything, just a little bit of time to sign up and make sure you get to the most current revision. Okay, so with the changes, as we saw in this top one, the last time that it was changed was January of 2020. But as soon as you open up your data sheet 8-9, on the first page, it's going to have a list like we see here. And this is going to tell you exactly where and what was changed inside of the data sheet without having to scroll through it and look at line item by line item. Keep in mind that all of the data, anything that was changed in the data sheet from Factory Mutual, they will go ahead and identify that with the color pink. So with that being said, we noticed that we will be talking today on a few of the things that were changed. The first one is Table 1, update to include sprinkler spacing guidelines for quick response K28 pendant storage sprinklers. We're going to move into the information previously provided that was in the two sections, and that we're going to see now how they provided one section to cover two sections. So they combine the two sections, put it into one. And then we're going to be looking at Table 17B. That was modified on the recent testings for quick response K28 and K33 pendant storage sprinklers. Okay, so going into 2.3.6.9, ceiling-only sprinkler protection require recommendations for ceiling heights over 45 feet. We're going to see the first one is that it's going to be using quick response, standard coverage, standard temperature, rated pendant storage sprinklers in the tables per 17B. The second item that we'll see here is they have made it clear now that you will use a wet pipe system. A single interlock pre-action, which a lot of people are familiar with, using that as a reference to a wet system, is not accepted. So you will be utilizing a wet pipe. The storage racks must meet the definition of the open frame, and the racks are limited to single and double row. Anytime that we're looking at drawings and we see that there's multiple row racks, these are not qualified for designs with ceiling heights over 45 feet. This is a nice chart that Factory Mutual put together. This is for when we get into the warehouses where they have the mineral wool or glass fiber insulation up at the roof, and a lot of times that would come down into a slope of the ceiling. So we're going to see here that in the 8-9, it says that the sprinkler has to be down from the center of the thermal element from the ceiling a maximum distance. So once again, when we're talking about this storage sprinkler, we're talking about the center line of the thermal element, the element in the sprinkler head, to the ceiling. This is a simple little equation that we can utilize to make sure that the distance down with whether it's the mineral wool or fiberglass insulation does not affect the application of the sprinkler head. You'll see here it's Y. Y is your maximum distance down minus half of X. So we would take X, make half of that, subtract that from what Y is, and that would give you the distance that insulation can be down. We are going to go over in the next few slides the maximum distance that the storage sprinkler can be down from the ceiling. Okay, why we're talking about moving up to above storage heights of 45 feet, we're going to see that there's 4 K factors listed. 3 of them are here, which is a K22, K25, and the K28. The 4th K factor is the K33. Unfortunately, I do not have a picture of that particular sprinkler head at the moment. So moving into Table 17B, this is the chart that we're going to use when we're looking at all the information to determine the design of the sprinkler, our calculations, and to help determine pipe methods. So as I mentioned earlier, we're going to start off at the left-hand side to store the storage arrangement. So we can have solid piled, palletized, bin box, shelf storage, single row, and double row racks. As a reminder, multiple row racks are not accepted when we have storage heights over 45 feet. The second column coming off the left would be our commodity. Once again, we had mentioned this in the past, but we'll make sure we re-emphasize that. We're going to be looking at a class 1 through 4 and carton unexpanded plastics. Now we're going to move into the ceiling heights, and we're going to notice that there's several different boxes here. So the first one that we're going to look at is ceiling heights over 45 up to 50. So that would be storage height of 45, the ceiling up to 50. After we're done with this, we'll then talk about building heights up to 55 with storage at 50. So going back to maximum ceiling heights of 50 with the maximum storage height of 45, we see that there is 4 K factors that are accepted to be used with this design. That would be the K22, the K25, the K28, and the K33. The next column over is the maximum vertical distance that we were just talking about with that chart if you have insulation hanging down off of the ceiling. So here's where we're going to pull that information to make sure, as I said, 13, and you'll see some other 17 inches down. Remember, when we're talking about this, this is from the ceiling height to the center of the sprinkler's thermal element, whether the fusible link. We were going to be doing center, not down to the deflector. Next chart we're going to see is the minimum aisle width. When we get into the minimum aisle width, we're going to see, your 6 or 8. Then we're going to get into the design. For the designers that are doing the calculations, we need to know how many sprinklers and what's the pressure that is required. So we'll see with the K22, you're looking at 10 at 63. K25 has 2 options. If you're going to be 13 inches down from the ceiling, rather 17 inches down from the ceiling. When you get into the K28, we're going to notice that there's an asterisk. So we're going to get into the asterisk in a minute, which right now, by looking at this, it would show 10 sprinklers at 40. However, as I said, we see an asterisk, so we have to go down and read the asterisk. Then we have the K33. Let's go down and read the asterisk for what the K28 would represent. So the design of using 10 sprinklers can be reduced to 9 automatic sprinklers at 40 psi. When we do a water supply, when we can do a calc that shows the water supply can provide a minimum pressure of 80 to both branch lines. So we will be doing 2 calcs. We'll be going into a little bit more detail with both calculations. But for the people that are on the phone from past in the history, we used to talk about doing 2 calcs for different densities. Now we're talking about doing 2 calcs to provide a 9-head calc versus a 10-head calc. Going back up to the chart in 17B, we're going to see now moving into the ceiling height of 55 feet and maximum storage of 50, we now are limited to 2 K factors. Those 2 K factors will be the K28 and the K33. You'll notice that they're both at 9 sprinklers at the PSIs listed. This is kind of like a tax. We're going to get into the next slide and talk about the gallons per minute when you do the calculations with the system. Okay, so anticipating the flow rates. We just went over how many sprinklers and what the pressures are. Now it's nice to kind of have an idea of your GPM. When you have a storage tank to supply your water, it's very important to look at your gallons per minute and decide which K factor is going to be the best application. So let's look at the 50 ceiling up to above 45 up to 50-foot ceilings with them. And you're going to notice once again, we're back at the K22 going down to the K33. Once again, we show the deflector distance with the maximum distance down, once again, to the center of the element, not the deflector, but the center of the element to the ceiling. We're going to give you the total number of sprinklers in the design pressure, and your aisle width. And at this point, now we can see the flow rates that would be required with each K factor. Going down to 55 feet, we're going to now, as I said in the past on the table 17B, they only allow for 2 K factors, the K28 and the K33. And it has the same information as well. And then we'll see the flow here as well. So keep in mind with the design at 50 feet, you have a 9 sprinkler head with using the K28. You're going to use 9 sprinkler head, and then we're going to have, okay, for ceiling sprinklers designed with the 9 sprinklers, the base hydraulic design with the remote sprinklers. So what you would have is 3 sprinklers on the most remote branch line, and then you would have 3 other branch lines with 3 sprinklers on each one. That would give you a total of your 9 head. For the ceiling sprinkler systems that indicated that need 10 sprinklers, we have 2 items that we have to look at to determine how are we going to add that second or the next 1 sprinkler for that. So number A, or letter A, for the ceiling slope, if we're looking at a ceiling slope that is up to 5 degrees, then we're going to go with this here, which would be your most remote 3 sprinklers operating on the most 3 branch lines, plus 1 sprinkler on the most remote 4th branch line. And we'll have some diagrams here in a few minutes to look at this. But just remember, if you have a ceiling slope up to 5 degrees, then it's going to be the most 3 remote branch lines, with each one having 3 sprinklers, and then that 4th remote branch line would have 1 sprinkler. If we have slopes, option B will be for ceilings that have slopes over 5 degrees. Then we're going to change that up a little bit, and we're going to add 4 sprinklers for our design. Our design area will be 4 sprinklers operating on the most 2 remote branch lines. So instead of having 3 branch lines with 3 sprinklers, we're now going down to the most remote 2 branch lines. And each one of those branch lines would give us a total of 4 sprinklers, which would equal 8. The 3rd most remote branch line, we would then add the 2 extra sprinklers. So in this situation, if we have a ceiling slope over 5 degrees, we're going to have 2 branch lines, the 2 most remote branch lines having 4 sprinklers on it, and then the 3rd most remote branch line would have 2 sprinklers on it. Okay, so calculations. As I said, there's 2 calcs that are needed when we look at the K28. So we can look in the diagram here, and we'll see this is an example of a 9-head calc, where once again you have 3 sprinklers on 3 most remote branch lines. So you got the most remote, and then the next 2 up. You'll see your nodes coming all the way back to your riser and then out to your water supply. So this is one of the calcs that you would do when we're using the K28, and then we would do a second calc as we talked about. So the second calc that seems a little confusing, which is not that confusing, as I said, the second calc that we would be doing would be the total of 4 sprinkler heads, 2 sprinklers on the most 2 remote branch lines. And what we're doing there is making sure that we get the 80 psi to those heads. By doing that, we are able to achieve the 9-head calc with a lower flow going to the system, which will help out with your pipe sizing when obviously we can lower the amount of gallons per minute for the sprinkler system. That's going to help you out with smaller branch lines and smaller tank storage facilities when you have to have water tanks to feed your sprinkler system. We know that that can be very costly. At this point, do you guys have any questions?
Thanks, Brian. We'll wait a couple minutes, see if some questions roll in here. Again, you can type your question at any time into the Q&A box in your WebEx screen. And we'll have time for a few. We'll keep it right to about 30 minutes, so we do have time for a couple of questions. And if we don't get to all of them, Brian will be happy to follow up with you offline, I'm sure, or maybe another member of our tech services team. So Brian, here's a first question that came in. Can you design with this design in a pre-action single interlock system?
So no, keep in mind that in past single interlock pre-action systems would be designed similar as a wet system. However, when we get above the 45 feet of height, we are now required to be wet system only. So we want to make sure that nobody would think that a single interlock past experience design is equivalent to a wet system. That would not be acceptable when we're going with storage over 45 feet.
Okay. We have a question. Is this criteria only applicable for FM? What about NFPA?
Okay, so no, it's not applicable to only FM, as they are an approved listing body. So FM or UL has the NFPA standards allow you to utilize other criteria that is done by an approved listed body. So because FM is an approved listed body, you would be able to utilize this utilizing all the information from 8-9.
Great. This is a rather technical one. When talking about a tank supplied system, is the total water volume based on the 9-head calculation or the 4-head calculation?
It would be the 9-head calculation. Now remember, we have to add our duration, and you would have to add in your hose allowance.
Okay.
So keep in mind, sorry Nancy, to keep
Go
in
ahead.
mind that second calc, the 4-head calc, all that's doing is to make sure that you can provide 80 PSI to the last 2 remote areas.
Okay, great, thank you. Here's another one. What is the maximum distance the K28 can be installed from the ceiling?
So if we go back to the charts, which I'm going to go back to the chart just to make sure I have the right information here. And this can be very confusing at times, so it's very good to look. So this chart is what I like to use. So using the K28, you are going to be 13 inches down from the center of the element of the deflector. I'm sorry, the center of the element of the sprinkler head from the ceiling. Remember, it's the center of the element, not the deflector. So we would be looking at whether it is up to 50-foot high ceiling or up to a 55-foot high ceiling. We'd be looking at 13 inches down from the ceiling to center line of our element.
Okay, thank you. This one, I'm not sure if you will know offhand, and if we need to follow up offline, that's fine. Can you go back to the roof slopes chart? The person is asking, can you give us an indication as to what the degree-based slope compares with? You said it might be in metric. Let's see. We might have to follow up offline with that one. No problem on that.
We'll
go ahead.
follow up offline on that, just because
Yep.
that gets in a little bit more information that's not on the PowerPoint that we would have to go back in and look at 8-9. So we'd be glad to follow up afterwards when we had the full.
Perfect. Someone asked, are there any new storage design constraints given the new heights available?
Say that one more time, please.
Their question was, are there any new storage design constraints given the new heights available?
Okay,
No,
so
she
no,
did.
the design constraints are going to be um, s- similar, same as the past. The difference is we're not going to we are only going to be able to utilize the group 1 through 4 commodity with the plastic, the unexpanded plastic. You will not be able to do the other plastics, expanded, unexpanded, the other plastics. The other way that we have this is it is now making it easier for the designers to understand and lay out the remote area as the specific remote area. It's very specific what the remote area shall be.
Okay. An interesting question. Are any of these acceptable for multi-row racks at this point?
So no, there are none of these will be acceptable for multi-row racks. Can only be single or double, palletized, solid tile. Once you get above ceiling heights over 45 feet, there will be no multiple racks listed.
Okay.